Do you want to buy a battery? It's $1. Yes or no? That's a causal ask. And the reason it's a causal ask is because it only has two possible outcomes. Either I get $1 or I go home disappointed. An effectual ask is much more open-ended in that it may start specific or it may start broad, but it opens the canvas for a variety of different possibilities as the conversation unfolds. It asks the other person not only what they're interested in, but also what they can bring to the table. It explores a lot of different possible relationships. Maybe I expected that you would be a customer, but maybe you're interested in being an investor. I don't know until we've had that effectual conversation.
In the incubator, we use the ask as a way to get people out of their shells.
Overall, the way you want to talk to potential stakeholders in the case of building a network effectually and building a venture effectually is really to get them to start thinking with you in the first place.
In a startup, you need the kind of ask that get people to put skin in the game. Like, will you help me make this idea or this dream a reality?
You have to take risk, and you can't be afraid. And you don't be afraid to ask the why.
I'm always in pursuit of a yes from someone. Hey, are you interested in collaborating on this? Yes? What would it take to get you to do this? Learn and say, okay, so if I do that, would you want to do that with me? Yes?
What are you trying to do when you talk to them? On the one hand, in the causal case, because you know exactly what you want and from whom and why, you can create a pitch. But when you talk to potential stakeholders or even just general people who may or may not self-select into your venture down the road, how do you have the conversation?
Please listen. Listening precedes all asking, usually. At least some listening. I mean, people will give you guidance on what they can say yes to, what they don't want to say yes to, and if you're tone deaf to that, it's not they're not going to become a co-creation partner with you. Ask good questions, listen, and oftentimes people will tell you exactly what they want to do.
But ultimately, you're trying to find people who are interested and engaged in what you're trying to do and willing to connect with you to fulfill and give you a response that's going to help get you somewhere with what you're doing.
People will tell you what they will say yes to. Ask them, listen, and then you'll know what to ask for.
So if you go around asking people, here is something that I'm thinking of doing, would you be willing to buy it? Would you be willing to invest in it? Would you be willing to help me out as a CTO? Would you be willing to be my supplier? However you start the conversation, the idea here is to say, what would it take for you to actually come on board and work with me?
So I'd say the best way to initiate an ask is to be open-ended in it.
I'm trying to learn what this person wants to say yes to.
The more that I ask in an open way, the deeper the commitments that I tend to get.
If I say, will you or can you, those are yes or no questions, and those are a little bit more threatening, and they don't allow the other person to be creative. Better questions are open-ended questions, things that are like, what would it take for this thing to happen? How might we do this together? What could I do that would be of value to you? These are good open questions that allow the conversation to get more rich.
Instead of being very deliberate in what you want somebody to do in return for you, go in and saying, hey, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. These are my goals. These are my aspirations. Is there a way for you to help me achieve those?
So the entire frame of the conversation is this phrase, what would it take for you to be part of this?
If I leave the ask more open and allow them to contribute what motivates them or what they're most interested in bringing to the table, what they're willing to give me is often more than I would have asked for in the first place.
So only information that actually comes with skin in the game is relevant.
The big thing is ask, period.
The best outcome then is when you're receptive to anything someone will offer you as long as there's skin in the game.
So in every conversation in the effectual case, you're really looking to people who are willing to commit something that is valuable. And to the extent that the other person commits something, you go in that direction.
That's probably one of the things that motivates me. I just love getting to a place where, I say yes to somebody, they say yes back, and now we're doing stuff together. That makes me happy. An important thing on this skin in the game question is, or yeses broadly, if they don't say yes, everything else is a no. A not yet is a no. A later is a no. Everything but the word yes is a no. And that's a very hard reality for entrepreneurs to internalize. But if it's not a yes, it's a no.
Well, getting a no is actually very good, because a no is rejection, and rejection leads to iteration. And quite honestly, the number one thing startups can do is to get rejections and iterate their product. So asking is actually very good for it, because it often can lead to rejections, which will ultimately advance the product.
It's never fun to say to an excited entrepreneur, I see what you're pitching, but I think it's really stupid and I never want to work with you. Like, no one wants to say that to an entrepreneur because it's mean. So the ask allows you to get into how serious a person is without putting the other person in such a place where they just have to be a jerk, because nobody wants to be that jerk. And so what happens is they'll be nice to you normally, or at least they'll soften it. Where if you say, is there any way that you could give me X? Or what sorts of things could you commit to this process? A more open question. And if they then say, I don't know what I could commit, well, then they've answered your question. I'm not that serious. You just have to hear it.
So the best way to respond to a no is to try to find out why that's a no. Because if it's a hard no and somebody really isn't interested at any level, you might not be able to convert that individual. But most of the time, people want to help. Almost everybody wants to help. And so finding out what you could do with your idea so that it becomes more open-ended and inviting will lead to a desirable outcome.
So sometimes with an entrepreneur, you get these individuals that are so convinced that their answer is the right answer. And internally you see them struggling. And I see people struggling with that, and I say to them, listen, you have to be willing to listen and to pivot. And that's one hurdle that I see.
We like it when people give us positive reinforcement, but often the most critical to learning and to making sales is asking the hard questions. Why wouldn't you work with us? Why wouldn't you accept this product? And understand the objections so that you can either explain how that objection can be solved, or guide your next product move based on what customers are actually objecting to, what's holding them back from actually buying into your product.
How do you take these obstacles, these things that have happened, and instead of looking at them as obstacles, how do you turn them into an opportunity? And that's one of the coolest things that I see happen in the iLab.
What is crucial about Effectual Cycle is the action and the interaction. So entrepreneurs are constantly, more or less frequently, advancing in their actions. And as they advance, they interact and they take something within them. That's something may be a partnership, to which the Effectual Cycle alludes to very clearly, but it can be just an insight.
So let's start with this cycle, so to speak, but don't think of it like a bunch of principles making a cycle. Think of it as we're going to watch humans do stuff, and we're going to see what they do, and we're going to kind of extract from that some underlying approaches or stances or positions or principles that seem to inform that behavior.
So entrepreneurship is not a linear thing in which you have an idea and retire X years later. It's an ongoing cycle that is based at its core your actions and interactions with others.
Who am I? What do I know? What can I do, etc. That's going to lead to some basic actions that get me headed in a particular direction. Actions that hopefully are aligned with interactions with other people providing me with more than just feedback, like, do I like your idea? Do I not like your idea? But note, your goal is actually commitments, people who are willing to help you in some particular way and help move the whole venture forward, or those who you realize are out. They're not interested in what you're doing, or they're signaling that there's something not so swanky about what you're doing and you need to consider it. As you accumulate these, you end up with kind of new means and goals. You're updating kind of your understanding of what you should be doing, and you're accumulating some things you'll need to move forward as part of the process, all bearing in mind that the universe can change around you while this is happening, but that's okay, right? We can sort of respond to those changes because now we have a few other things that help us survive is a strong word, but sort of operate amidst kind of the turmoil. We can still continue to move forward. At the high level though, also note that usually this will get a little subtext, which is we're trying to find new and different opportunities. So if we're trying to build something we already know how to build, we may never have to deploy this sort of approach. We may be able to stay completely, quote, causal, understand what needs to be done, get all the pieces together for what needs to be done, and then go do it, right? So the more we know about what we're up to, the more we can toggle and switch into that frame of mind. The less certain we are, or the less that we know, or the less we have all the things we need, the more we may be likely to shift into this frame of thinking.
We've already recognized you probably aren't going to have the perfect idea. But the question is, how do you get to the perfect idea? And the answer is through interactions and then commitments. Interactions give you new means to work with, and new individuals to work with, and new potentials to consider. Commitments help you choose between those and help you prioritize. Sometimes those choices will take you in a somewhat different direction or a very different direction that some people will call a pivot. Regardless, the point is that as you work your way through the effectual process, it's guided by the people that you talk with and then those that make commitments to you.